The small town of Shadow Rock, nestled along the edge of the Coconino National Forest in northern Arizona, wasn't much more than a dot on the map. Pine trees lined every road, and the sharp scent of sap drifted through the air no matter the season. Most homes sat on wide, quiet lots, their yards brushing up against the endless forest. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved from porches and kids played with scraped knees and dirt under their fingernails. 6-year-old Caleb Whitmore belonged to the forest in a way most kids didn't anymore. While others clung to tablets and cartoons, he ran barefoot over pine needles, imagined battles in the underbrush, and hunted for hidden treasure behind boulders and rotting logs. His hair was a tousled mop of sandy blonde, always sun-bleached and uncombed. Green eyes, too curious for his own good, scanned every path like he was on some secret mission. His arms and legs were decorated with tiny scabs and freckles, souvenirs from daily adventures. Caleb lived in a one-story wood-paneled house on the eastern edge of town, where the backyard ended in a chain-link fence and beyond that, nothing but trees. His mother, Olivia, was a trauma nurse at the Flagstaff Medical Center, just a 30-minute drive down the winding forest roads. She worked long shifts, 12 hours most days, and came home with tired eyes and sore feet, often too drained to do much more than kiss Caleb's head and fall asleep on the couch. Still, she made time for him in small, powerful ways. She packed his backpack each morning with snacks and band-aids, labeled his forest maps with little stars and notes like, "Watch for snakes here," or "Deer trail this way." And every time he left the yard, she gave him the same gentle command, "Be back before sundown, my little ranger." That morning had been no different. "Are you going on patrol again?" she asked, kneeling to zip up his windbreaker. "Yup," Caleb replied, slipping his arms into the sleeves with practiced efficiency. "I'm mapping the river bend today. Might be bobcats." She smiled, exhaustion crinkling her eyes. "Just remember, rangers don't miss dinner. Got it?" "Got it," he said, snapping a two-fingered salute like he'd seen on some military show his cousin let him watch once. He grabbed his backpack, red and faded from too many summers in the sun, and slung it over his shoulders. Inside was his usual kit, a peanut butter and honey sandwich, a bottle of water, a plastic compass, and his most treasured possession, an old flashlight with chipped green paint, once belonging to his father. He didn't remember his dad much. The man had left when Caleb was just a toddler, but that flashlight was something he held on to. As Olivia watched her son disappear into the trees beyond the yard, she whispered like she always did, "Heroes keep their promises." And in the woods, Caleb's adventure had just begun. The forest that morning felt alive. Shafts of golden sunlight spilled through the thick canopy of ponderosa pines, casting long, dappled shadows across the soft forest floor. The air was cool and dry, filled with the scent of dry needles, damp earth, and the distant, piney perfume of early autumn. Caleb wandered deeper into the woods, hopping over roots and ducking under low branches, narrating his journey out loud in a whispery voice only he could hear. "Captain Caleb," he whispered, "has entered enemy territory. No signs of movement. Proceeding with caution." He crouched low behind a cluster of ferns, poking the plastic compass out ahead of him like it was a radar. A squirrel bolted up a nearby tree, and Caleb grinned. "False alarm," he muttered. "The perimeter's clear." He played like that for nearly an hour, occasionally stopping to examine a strange pine cone or imagine how many trolls could live in the hollow of a mossy log. Time always moved differently out here, slow and heavy, like the forest breathed in its own rhythm. That's when he heard it. At first, it was so faint it could have been nothing, a sharp rustle, a low, breathy sound. Caleb paused mid-step, holding his breath. There it was again. A whimper. A short, wounded cry, like someone trying not to be heard but needing help all the same. His pulse quickened. He turned toward the sound, every fiber of his body alert. Caleb had heard plenty of things in these woods, songbirds, coyotes, even the hoot of an owl one lucky afternoon, but nothing like this. This sound didn't belong. It was too soft, too broken. He hesitated. His mother had always warned him not to go too far. But something tugged at him, something he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the way the whimper sounded, not just scared, but alone. He whispered to himself, "Rangers don't leave anyone behind." Pushing deeper into the trees, Caleb stepped carefully, brushing branches aside and making his way toward the sound. As he rounded a thicket of sagebrush, the forest seemed to hush around him. The pine trees stood closer together here, and the air turned cooler, quieter, almost watchful. Then he saw it. Beyond a line of rusted chain-link fence, partially swallowed by weeds and thorny brush, lay a massive dog, trapped, hurt, and barely able to move. Its tan and black coat was streaked with dirt and dried blood. One leg twisted unnaturally beneath its body, tangled in strands of old barbed wire. Caleb froze. The dog's head lifted weakly. Its eyes locked onto his, deep amber, wide with pain but startlingly calm. Caleb's breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward slowly. "Hey there, girl," he said softly, barely above a whisper. "It's okay. I see you." The dog didn't growl. She didn't even flinch. She simply let out another soft whimper. And in that moment, Caleb knew, his mission had changed. He wasn't on patrol anymore. He was about to save a life. Caleb stood still, heart pounding in his chest, barely breathing as he stared at the wounded dog before him. She was enormous, far bigger than any dog he'd ever seen up close. Her black and tan coat was caked with mud, dried blood, and burrs, but even in her battered state, she looked powerful. Her chest rose and fell in shallow pants, each breath shaky and strained. The barbed wire was wrapped tightly around her back leg, biting into her flesh with every twitch. Her ears perked weakly as he stepped closer, and for a moment, Caleb froze, unsure. He'd seen cartoons where animals snapped when cornered. But this dog didn't growl. She didn't bark. She just watched him with eyes that shimmered like dark honey in the light, eyes full of pain, yes, but something else too. Hope. Trust. Maybe even fear. Caleb crouched down slowly, keeping his voice low and soft. "Hey, girl," he whispered. "It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you." The dog let out a faint whimper, her head resting back against the dirt as if to show she understood. That tiny gesture broke something open inside him, like a secret handshake between them. She didn't want to be alone. She didn't want to be scared. Carefully, he inched closer, dropping to his knees just beside her. The wire around her leg was rusty and tight, digging into her skin where the fur had been rubbed raw. Blood crusted the metal, and the flesh around it was swollen and angry. Caleb swallowed hard. He didn't know much about injuries, just what he'd seen his mom do when she patched him up after a scraped elbow or a bee sting, but he knew this dog needed help. Fast. "I'm gonna try to get you out, okay?" he said. "But you gotta promise not to bite me." The dog blinked slowly, her tail thumping weakly once in the dirt. That was enough. Caleb slid his backpack off his shoulders and dug through it, pulling out the plastic sandwich bag that held his peanut butter sandwich. He tore off a corner and held it out, hand trembling slightly. The dog lifted her head, sniffed, and gently took the bite from his fingers. Her tongue brushed his hand, warm and soft. "You're not scary at all," he murmured. "You're just hurt." He dug a bit deeper, pulling out the small pair of child-safe scissors he sometimes used to cut twine or poke holes in tree bark. They weren't made for cutting metal, but maybe. He set to work, his fingers carefully prying the barbed wire away from her leg one twist at a time. The metal was stubborn and dug into his skin, nicking his fingers, but he kept going. Every time he accidentally tugged too hard and the dog whimpered, he whispered, "I'm sorry," and kept on. She didn't move. She didn't resist. She just watched him with those huge, patient eyes. Finally, after several tense minutes, the last loop of wire came free. Caleb leaned back, exhaling hard, hands smeared with rust and blood. The dog let out a soft whine, then, slowly, shifted her weight and tried to stand. Her leg trembled beneath her, clearly still hurting, but she managed to lift herself, barely. "You did it," Caleb whispered, amazed. "You're free." The dog turned to him, sniffed his hand again, and then did something that made Caleb's heart swell. She licked the back of his hand, right over one of the tiny cuts. He smiled wide. "You're not just any dog," he said softly. "You're something special." And from that moment on, he was no longer alone in the woods. He had a partner. The sun had started its slow descent behind the treetops, casting long shadows across the forest floor as Caleb helped the injured German shepherd limp through the woods. Every few steps, she would pause, panting hard, her back leg trembling beneath her. Caleb stayed right beside her, his tiny hand resting on her shoulder, speaking softly each time she hesitated. "It's not far now," he whispered. "Just a little bit more. I promise." They moved slowly, weaving through narrow trails only Caleb knew by heart. Twigs cracked underfoot, and pine needles crunched with every step. The forest, usually so full of playful wonder to him, felt quieter now, like it was holding its breath. When they reached the edge of Caleb's backyard, the big dog stopped. Her ears perked up, her nose twitching as she took in the unfamiliar scents. She didn't growl, but she didn't move forward either. Caleb crouched beside her, giving her space. "It's okay," he said gently. "That's my house. You're safe now." He led her across the back lawn to a wooden structure tucked into the far corner of the yard, his father's old gardening shed. It had stood unused for years, its green paint peeling, the hinges rusted, and a single cracked window streaked with dust. Olivia never bothered with it. Caleb, on the other hand, saw it as a castle, a clubhouse, a fortress, whatever he needed it to be. Today, it would become a sanctuary. He pulled hard on the latch. It stuck at first, then creaked open with a loud groan. Dust motes danced in the beam of sunlight slicing through the open door. "You can stay here," Caleb told her, motioning inside. "Just for now. Until we figure things out." The dog stepped forward cautiously, sniffing at the doorframe before limping in. The shed was cluttered with forgotten tools, old lawn chairs, and a stack of dusty boxes filled with tangled Christmas lights. Caleb moved quickly, dragging an old tarp into the corner to make a nest. Then he ran back into the house, careful not to wake his mother, and gathered supplies like a boy on a mission. First, an old blanket from the linen closet, faded and warm. Then a plastic bowl, which he filled with cool water from the kitchen sink. Last, he opened the fridge and pulled out a few leftover chicken strips from dinner the night before. He paused, considering the consequences, then added one of the chocolate chip cookies from the jar. Just in case she needed dessert. Back in the shed, the dog hadn't moved. She lay curled in the corner, her head resting on her paws, eyes half closed. "I brought presents," Caleb said proudly, setting everything down near her. "Blanket, water, food, and first aid. Kind of." He kneeled beside her, unzipping the small first aid pouch his mom always kept in the kitchen drawer. It held antiseptic wipes, gauze, and some butterfly bandages. He dabbed at the wound gently, murmuring apologies every time she flinched. "I'll fix you up," he whispered. "Just like my mom fixes me." After he wrapped her leg in uneven layers of gauze, he sat beside her, his back against the wall, his heart pounding with pride. The big dog lifted her head and, slowly, carefully, laid it in his lap. Caleb didn't move. He just smiled, eyes shining in the dim light. "You need a name," he said, stroking behind her ears. "I think I'll call you Valor." The dog let out a soft exhale, almost like agreement. And in that dusty old shed at the edge of the forest, a quiet promise was made between boy and dog, a promise that would change both of their lives. The first sign of trouble. The next morning broke quiet and bright, with golden sunlight streaming through the treetops. Caleb was already awake, lying in bed with his eyes fixed on the ceiling, clutching his flashlight like a good luck charm. He hadn't slept much, his thoughts had been filled with Valor, the chip, and that strange feeling in the woods. When his mom left to run errands, Caleb didn't waste a second. He grabbed a water bottle, a piece of leftover sausage from breakfast, and a clean dish towel. Then he slipped out the back door and crossed the dew-speckled lawn to the shed. Valor was waiting. She lifted her head as he opened the door, her ears twitching forward. Her tail gave a gentle wag, slow but sure. Caleb knelt beside her with a smile. "Hey, girl. I missed you," he said, reaching to gently scratch behind her ears. She leaned into the touch. He refreshed her water, laid out the sausage, and carefully unwrapped her bandage. The wound was still angry and red, but it looked cleaner now. He dabbed it with a wet cloth, whispering apologies each time she flinched. As he reached for the gauze, his eyes landed once again on her collar. Thick, heavy-duty leather. Definitely not the kind they sold at the feed store in town. There was a metal nameplate, but it was so deeply scratched that nothing was legible. Curious, Caleb ran his fingers along the underside and felt something odd. A bump. He pulled the leather flap up and found a tiny metal rectangle tucked into a hidden pouch. It was about the size of a dime and etched with numbers and letters, SK9, M457, GSDF. Caleb blinked. "What is this?" He slid the chip into his pocket, just as the unmistakable sound of tires on gravel reached his ears. He froze. Peeking through the shed's grimy window, Caleb saw a black SUV pulling into the driveway. It was sleek, polished, with windows tinted dark as midnight. A man stepped out. Tall. Sharp suit. Long black coat. He didn't look like anyone from Shadow Rock. Caleb's stomach dropped. The man wasn't just visiting. He was looking for something. Or someone. The man in black returns. Caleb watched from behind the curtain, his fingers clutching the fabric so tightly it wrinkled in his grip. The black SUV sat parked at the curb like a shadow that didn't belong in the warm light of their quiet neighborhood. The man inside didn't move for a long moment. Then, finally, the door opened. Out stepped the same tall man from earlier. Now Caleb could see him clearly. He had sharp features, hair combed back with military precision, and wore a long black coat that didn't quite match the Arizona heat. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made Caleb's skin crawl. Calculating. Cold. He walked up the front steps with confidence and knocked, 3 times, hard and crisp. Olivia answered. "Good morning, ma'am," the man said smoothly, holding up a laminated badge. "Name's Maddox. I'm working with a federal task force on a sensitive recovery case. We're tracking a military asset that's gone missing, an animal, actually. A German shepherd." Caleb's heart skipped. "Military?" Olivia echoed, surprised. "Yes, ma'am. Very specific training. Highly classified. This animal is considered unstable and potentially dangerous if approached without proper command authority." From the hallway, Caleb could barely breathe. Dangerous? That couldn't be true. She may be injured and hiding. "We've traced movement patterns to this area," Maddox continued. "Have you or your neighbors seen anything unusual? A large dog, perhaps?" Olivia glanced over her shoulder. "No. Nothing like that," she said slowly. "Just squirrels and the neighbor's poodle." Maddox's smile was tight. "If anything comes to mind, please call." He handed her a card, black, simple, no logo. Just a number. Caleb noticed his eyes flick toward the backyard. Toward the shed. "Appreciate your time," Maddox said, then turned on his heel and walked back to the SUV. Only once the vehicle pulled away did Caleb exhale. He backed away from the curtain, heart thudding. He had lied. Maddox had lied. Valor wasn't dangerous. She was hiding. She was being hunted. And now, Caleb knew the truth. Whatever that chip was, whatever secrets Valor carried, they were important enough that someone like Mr. Maddox was willing to lie, and maybe worse, to find her. And Caleb had just become her only protector. The secret hidden in the collar. Caleb sat cross-legged on the shed floor, the chip in his palm, Valor's head resting quietly in his lap. The light from his flashlight flickered faintly across the dusty walls. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Inside, everything was still, except for Caleb's mind. He stared at the tiny metal rectangle. It was no bigger than a postage stamp, but it felt heavy with meaning. He traced the engraved letters for the 5th time, SK9M457 GSDF. "What are you?" he whispered. Valor didn't respond, but her breathing remained steady, and her body warm against his side. She seemed to sense the tension growing in Caleb's chest. He gently rolled the chip between his fingers. It wasn't just some name tag. It looked like part of something, like a key to a much larger lock. A memory stirred. Last summer, his cousin Tyler had shown him a SIM card from his tablet. It had looked kind of like this, only this one felt more serious, like something from a spy movie. Caleb pulled out his mom's old smartphone from the drawer in her nightstand. It was slow and clunky, but it still worked. He powered it on, bypassed the lock screen, he knew the password was his birthday, and opened the search bar in the browser. He typed SK9M457 GSDF chip. At first, the results were confusing, long articles full of words he didn't understand. Military acronyms. Defense codes. Hardware specs. But one result caught his eye. MWD identification codes, what they mean. MWD. Military working dog. His heart jumped. He clicked on it. The article was from a military blog. It explained that elite military dogs were often tagged with codes for identification. The SK9 prefix stood for Scent K9, dogs trained in advanced scent tracking. The rest of the code was a serial number. Some units used hidden chips as backup ID in case the collar tags were damaged or removed in the field. Caleb looked down at Valor. Her dark eyes watched him closely. "You're not just any dog," he murmured. "You're a soldier." And suddenly it made sense, why Maddox had come, why the collar's nameplate was scratched out, why she was hiding in the woods. Someone had erased her identity on purpose. someone didn't want her to be found. But why? He opened the phone again, this time searching the full code. SK9M457 GSDF. Among the search results was a government bulletin from 2 years ago. He couldn't read it all, but he saw the words Fort Carson, Classified Tracking Unit, and K-9 assets compromised. Compromised. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he understood this: Valor had once belonged to the military. Something had gone wrong. And now, someone very bad was trying to erase her existence, and whatever she was carrying with her. Caleb clenched the chip in his fist. "I won't let them take you," he said quietly. "I'll figure this out. I promise." Valor let out a soft, almost human-sounding exhale, like she believed him. And Caleb knew, deep in his chest, that their mission had only just begun. What Valor hid beneath the trees. The next evening, after Olivia went to bed, Caleb slipped out the back door once more, flashlight in hand and the chip tucked securely in his pocket. He crossed the yard swiftly, the grass cool and damp beneath his sneakers, and tapped gently on the shed door. "Valor," he whispered. "It's me." Inside, the German shepherd stirred, lifting her head and wagging her tail faintly. Caleb sat beside her, stroking her ears. She was healing, slowly, but tonight, her body was tense, alert. Her eyes didn't settle. "You okay?" he asked. Valor got to her feet, limping slightly, and walked to the door. She turned and looked back at him expectantly. "You want me to follow you?" A soft whine. Caleb hesitated. The woods at night were scary, full of sounds and shadows. But there was something urgent in Valor's eyes. So he grabbed his hoodie, zipped it up tight, and followed her into the trees. The flashlight beam danced across trunks and leaves as they moved deeper, back toward the place where Caleb had found her. Valor led slowly but deliberately, stopping now and then to check on him. After about 15 minutes, she stopped at a thick patch of bushes and began pawing at the ground. "You buried something?" She looked at him, then back at the dirt. Caleb set the flashlight down and got to work. The earth was loose, and after just a few minutes of digging, his fingers struck canvas. He tugged harder and uncovered a military-style backpack, half covered in leaves and mud. He dragged it out and unzipped the main compartment. Inside were clothes, camo-patterned, folded neatly but dirty. A water bottle. A compass. A first aid kit, much larger and better stocked than the one in his kitchen. But there was more. In a side pocket, he found a small black pouch with a button clasp. He unsnapped it and pulled out a notebook and a flash drive. The notebook was full of messy handwriting, codes, and what looked like maps. Tucked into its front cover was a photo. It showed a younger Valor, standing tall next to a soldier in uniform. The man had his arm around her, both of them looking straight into the camera. On the back was a note written in black marker. "Sasha and Captain James Rivera, Fort Carson, 2022. "Sasha," Caleb whispered. "That's your real name?" Valor, "No, Sasha," whined softly and licked the photo in his hand. Tears welled in Caleb's eyes. "You had someone. And they're gone." He gently placed the photo back in the pouch and zipped the bag shut. Whatever Sasha had been carrying, it was connected to this man, Captain Rivera, and the secret someone wanted buried deep in these woods. Caleb looked up at Sasha. "You were trying to protect it all. Even hurt and alone, you still protected it." She stepped forward and rested her head against his chest. "I'll help you now," he whispered. "I promise, Sasha." And under the watchful trees, boy and dog sealed a bond that not even the darkest secret could break. Help comes from the shadows. 2 nights after finding the buried backpack, Caleb returned to the shed later than usual. His heart was racing, not just from the usual nerves of sneaking around after bedtime, but from something heavier. All day, the black SUV had circled the block 3 times. Once it even slowed in front of the house. Mr. Maddox didn't knock, but Caleb could feel his presence like a storm cloud waiting to strike. As Caleb stepped inside the shed, Sasha stirred from her blanket. She had been healing well, her eyes sharper now, her body stronger despite the pregnancy. She greeted Caleb with a soft nudge to his arm, then stood abruptly, ears perked toward the door. "What is it?" Caleb whispered, his own ears straining. Then he heard it too, a soft knock. Not on the house door. On the shed door. He froze. His mind raced. It wasn't his mom. She was asleep. And Maddox wouldn't knock this softly. "Sasha, hide," he said, pointing toward the space behind the stacked garden boxes. She hesitated, just for a moment, then slipped into the shadows. The knock came again. Heart pounding, Caleb crept forward, flashlight off. He pressed his ear to the wood. "It's okay," a woman's voice whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here for Sasha." Caleb blinked. Sasha? She knew her name. Slowly, he opened the door a crack. A young woman stood outside, dressed in dark tactical gear, her black hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her sharp eyes scanned the space behind him but softened when they met his. "You're Caleb, right?" she said. "I'm Agent Blair. I used to work with Sasha. I've been tracking her for weeks." Caleb didn't move. "I'm not with Maddox," she added quickly. "I'm trying to keep her safe, from him, and the people he works for." Behind Caleb, Sasha stepped out from hiding. Her eyes locked with the woman's. "Hey, girl," Blair whispered, kneeling down and holding out her hand. Sasha approached slowly, then pressed her nose into the agent's palm. "She remembers me," Blair said, eyes welling with emotion. "We were part of the same team." Caleb finally let the door open all the way. "What's going on? Why is Maddox after her? Why did she have that chip?" Blair stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "She was part of a classified K-9 unit stationed at Fort Carson," she began. "Captain Rivera, her handler, was investigating a weapons trafficking ring within the military. When he got too close, they took him out. Made it look like an accident. Sasha escaped with half the evidence, the chip you found." Caleb's stomach dropped. "Maddox and his people are trying to bury everything," Blair continued. "If they get Sasha, or that memory chip, everything Captain Rivera died for disappears." Caleb reached into his hoodie and pulled out the chip. "This is it?" Blair nodded. "That's one half. I have the other." She pulled out a matching chip from her pocket. "We put them together, we expose the truth. What do we do now?" Caleb asked, his voice trembling. "We get Sasha to safety," Blair said. "And we get this evidence to someone we can trust. But we have to move soon. Maddox is getting closer." Sasha gave a soft growl, warning, not fear. "We'll leave before dawn," Blair said firmly. "There's a safe house 2 miles from here." Caleb looked at Sasha. She looked stronger than ever. Ready. So was he. "Okay," he said. "Let's finish what Captain Rivera started." Flight into the trees. Before first light, the shed was already alive with quiet urgency. Agent Blair secured the memory chips in a waterproof pouch, which she tucked into a hidden pocket in her vest. Caleb packed bottles of water, a flashlight, and extra food for Sasha. Sasha herself paced anxiously, sensing that something big was about to happen. Outside, a thick fog had settled over the neighborhood, blanketing the world in a ghostly stillness. It was perfect for slipping away unseen. "We go now," Blair whispered, peeking through a crack in the shed's door. "Maddox's men are probably watching the roads. But they won't expect us to cut through the woods." Caleb nodded. His heart thumped like a drum, but he kept his hands steady. Sasha nudged his hand with her nose, as if to say, "You've got this." They slipped out the shed door and into the grass. Blair moved like a shadow, leading them along the edge of the property, then into the trees beyond. Caleb followed, Sasha at his side, her movements smooth despite her limp. She was no longer just a dog, she was his partner. His family. Branches cracked behind them. They all stopped. Blair raised a hand, signaling silence. Footsteps. Close. Flashlight beams began cutting through the trees, slicing across the fog like searchlights. "They're here," Blair whispered. "Split up." "What?" Caleb gasped. "Stay low. Stick to the trees. Meet at the old ranger outpost on Maple Ridge. Sasha knows the way." Blair melted into the trees before Caleb could respond. He grabbed Sasha's collar. "Let's go." They moved fast, ducking behind thick trunks and crawling beneath low-hanging limbs. Caleb's legs ached, and his hands stung from brambles. But they didn't stop. Not when a man's voice called out in the distance. Not when a flashlight beam nearly skimmed their backs. Then Sasha halted, her body stiff. A shape loomed ahead, tall, blocking their path. It was Maddox. He stepped into view, face calm, gun at his side. Well, he said, voice cold, there you are. Caleb froze. But Sasha didn't. With a sudden growl, she lunged, not at Maddox, but to knock Caleb sideways, out of the line of fire. A gunshot rang through the woods. Then everything exploded into motion. A miracle among chaos. Caleb hit the ground hard, the echo of the gunshot still ringing in his ears. For a second, all he could hear was the thump of his heart, pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Then, Sasha's growl. Sharp. Fierce. Protective. He scrambled to his feet just in time to see Sasha standing between him and Maddox, her teeth bared, her body rigid despite the tremble in her injured leg. Maddox's expression shifted, not to fear, but to cold calculation. He raised his weapon again. Sasha, no. Caleb cried, throwing himself forward. But before Maddox could pull the trigger, another figure burst from the trees, Agent Blair, gun drawn. Drop it, she shouted. Maddox spun. 2 more shots cracked through the fog. One struck a tree trunk near Blair's head, the other vanished into the mist. Then, chaos. Blair tackled Maddox from behind, sending them both crashing to the ground. Caleb ducked behind a fallen log, shielding his head. Sasha circled back to him, panting hard. Her belly looked heavier now. Distended. Caleb's eyes widened. Sasha, are you okay? She let out a low whine, and suddenly dropped to the forest floor, her body tensing. No, not now, Caleb whispered, kneeling beside her. You can't. But it was happening. A contraction rippled through her body. Her breathing changed, coming in rapid, shallow bursts. Caleb looked around desperately. Maddox and Blair were still struggling in the shadows, locked in combat. No help was coming. Sasha was going into labor. Right here. Right now. In the middle of a fog-choked forest, with danger still circling. Caleb tore off his hoodie and laid it beneath her. It's okay, he whispered, his hands shaking. I'm here. I'm right here. Sasha's eyes met his, and in them he saw not fear, but trust. Moments later, the first puppy arrived. Small. Wet. Still. Caleb's breath hitched. Then Sasha licked it, slow and sure. A tiny squeak escaped from the newborn, and Caleb let out a choked laugh. You did it, he whispered. You're amazing. And in that surreal moment, surrounded by trees, hunted by shadows, heart pounding, Caleb witnessed a miracle. New life, fighting its way into the world, even as the world itself threatened to fall apart. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. Caleb huddled close to Sasha and her newborn puppy beneath the twisted roots of a fallen tree, shielding them both from the cool wind and the gunfire echoing through the woods. Another contraction racked Sasha's body, and Caleb, his hands trembling, did what he could, speaking softly, stroking her fur, helping her bring a second puppy into the world. Sasha, even exhausted, remained calm. Focused. Fierce. Good girl, Caleb whispered, wrapping the shivering puppy in the sleeve of his hoodie. You're a warrior. Footsteps crunched over dead leaves. Closer. Faster. Caleb. Blair's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. Caleb peeked over the root. Blair was running toward them, face streaked with mud, her coat torn at the shoulder and blood oozing down her arm. Behind her, Maddox emerged like a ghost, face stone cold, gun glinting in the early dawn light. Blair dove beside Caleb, sliding across the ground and pulling him down. He's not giving up, she gasped. He knows we've got the evidence. Caleb pulled the waterproof pouch from his jacket. The chip's here. It's safe. Maddox's voice boomed out across the clearing. Blair. Step away. Hand over the chip. No one else needs to get hurt. Blair stood slowly, shielding Caleb and Sasha with her body. You already hurt too many people, she said, her voice steady. Captain Rivera. Sasha. And now you're threatening a child and a newborn litter? That's your line? Maddox smirked. Rivera was a traitor. You're too sentimental. You never understood the real mission. You mean selling weapons to terrorists and silencing anyone who found out? I mean preserving power, he snarled. Then he raised his gun. But before he could fire, Sasha let out a guttural growl, deep, powerful, maternal. With a strength that defied her injury and exhaustion, she rose, baring her teeth. Maddox hesitated. And Blair took her chance. She lunged. A single shot rang out, loud, final. Maddox staggered backward, gun falling from his hand, a look of disbelief frozen on his face. He collapsed to the forest floor. Silence fell. Then Sasha whimpered, sinking back to the ground beside her puppies, one paw protectively draped over them. Blair dropped to her knees, shaking. "It's over," she breathed. Caleb stared, wide-eyed. "Is he alive?" Blair muttered, checking Maddox's pulse. "But not going anywhere." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. "Back up." Finally. Later, at the ranger outpost, Blair uploaded both chips to a secure government server. Within minutes, the encrypted files began to reveal everything: names, dates, communications, hard proof that Maddox and several high-ranking officers had been involved in a weapons trafficking ring. Rivera had tried to expose them. They'd killed him for it. Sasha had escaped with the evidence. "You helped finish what Captain Rivera started," Blair told Caleb, her eyes proud and tired. "He'd be proud of you." "What's going to happen to Sasha?" Blair knelt beside the German shepherd, who was curled around her litter, breathing steadily. "She's no longer just a military asset. She's a hero. And now, she's a mother. There's no going back to the field. But there's a place for her. A safe one." Caleb stroked Sasha's ear gently. "Can she come home with me?" Blair smiled. "We'll make it happen." As the sun broke through the trees, golden light bathing the forest floor, Caleb held one of the puppies close to his chest. Sasha, battered but victorious, rested her head against his knee. Truth had come to light. Justice had found its way through the woods. And in the heart of a boy and a dog, a new chapter was just beginning. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. Caleb huddled close to Sasha and her newborn puppy beneath the twisted roots of a fallen tree, shielding them both from the cool wind and the gunfire echoing through the woods. Another contraction racked Sasha's body, and Caleb, his hands trembling, did what he could, speaking softly, stroking her fur, helping her bring a second puppy into the world. Sasha, even exhausted, remained calm. Focused. Fierce. "Good girl," Caleb whispered, wrapping the shivering puppy in the sleeve of his hoodie. "You're a warrior." Footsteps crunched over dead leaves. Closer. Faster. "Caleb." Blair's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. Caleb peeked over the root. Blair was running toward them, face streaked with mud, her coat torn at the shoulder and blood oozing down her arm. Behind her, Maddox emerged like a ghost, face stone cold, gun glinting in the early dawn light. Blair dove beside Caleb, sliding across the ground and pulling him down. "He's not giving up," she gasped. "He knows we've got the evidence." Caleb pulled the waterproof pouch from his jacket. "The chip's here. It's safe." Maddox's voice boomed out across the clearing. "Blair. Step away. Hand over the chip. No one else needs to get hurt." Blair stood slowly, shielding Caleb and Sasha with her body. "You already hurt too many people," she said, her voice steady. "Captain Rivera. Sasha. And now you're threatening a child and a newborn litter? That's your line?" Maddox smirked. "Rivera was a traitor. You're too sentimental. You never understood the real mission." "You mean selling weapons to terrorists and silencing anyone who found out?" "I mean preserving power," he snarled. Then he raised his gun. But before he could fire, Sasha let out a guttural growl, deep, powerful, maternal. With a strength that defied her injury and exhaustion, she rose, baring her teeth. Maddox hesitated. And Blair took her chance. She lunged. A single shot rang out, loud, final. Maddox staggered backward, gun falling from his hand, a look of disbelief frozen on his face. He collapsed to the forest floor. Silence fell. Then Sasha whimpered, sinking back to the ground beside her puppies, one paw protectively draped over them. Blair dropped to her knees, shaking. "It's over," she breathed. Caleb stared, wide-eyed. "Is he alive?" Blair muttered, checking Maddox's pulse. "But not going anywhere." Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. "Back up." Finally. Later, at the ranger outpost, Blair uploaded both chips to a secure government server. Within minutes, the encrypted files began to reveal everything: names, dates, communications, hard proof that Maddox and several high-ranking officers had been involved in a weapons trafficking ring. Rivera had tried to expose them. They'd killed him for it. Sasha had escaped with the evidence. You helped finish what Captain Rivera started, Blair told Caleb, her eyes proud and tired. He'd be proud of you. What's going to happen to Sasha? Blair knelt beside the German shepherd, who was curled around her litter, breathing steadily. She's no longer just a military asset. She's a hero. And now, she's a mother. There's no going back to the field. But there's a place for her. A safe one. Caleb stroked Sasha's ear gently. Can she come home with me? Blair smiled. We'll make it happen. As the sun broke through the trees, golden light bathing the forest floor, Caleb held one of the puppies close to his chest. Sasha, battered but victorious, rested her head against his knee. Truth had come to light. Justice had found its way through the woods. And in the heart of a boy and a dog, a new chapter was just beginning.